You are listening to the Small Town Big Talk Show, the weekly podcast for small town people with big dreams and ideas. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week we'll cover a topic meant to inspire, encourage, and empower you to live big in your small town. Although it has its challenges, nothing beats small town living, and we're committed to sharing the best of what's working in the communities we serve. So enjoy this episode, and we hope it helps you to bloom where you've been planted. My guest on today's episode is Terra Cypher. Terra is the artist behind Wild Goat Design, a creative adventure full of painting, signs, globes, murals, and teaching. Terra joins me on the show today to talk about being artistic in a small town, the value of harnessing your creativity, leveraging your creativity, and what it does for the community when everybody realizes that we all are creative in some way, shape, or form. She shares the arc of her own story with starting her entrepreneurial journey to where she actually was able to quit her full-time job and sell just her art through her Etsy shop. She shares a lot of beautiful things for all of us to consider in small towns, and frankly, she speaks to possibility. So enjoy this chat with Terra Cypher. Well, hey, Terra, welcome to the Small Town Big Talk Show.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you.
I'm excited to be here. I think it's going to be fun.
It is. I promise. We'll have a good time. So prior to hitting record here, you and I were chatting just a little bit. I would love it if you would share kind of your origin story of Wild Goat Design, how you started it, what it looks like now, and then we'll just kind of see where our conversation takes us from there.
All right. Well, Wild Goat Design started about maybe 4.5 years ago. And I've always been a very creative person. I've loved like drawing and painting since I was little. My parents really encouraged that. And I eventually went to school and I studied fine arts. I got a bachelor's in fine arts and I graduated. And after you graduate college, like you don't have like unlimited amounts of time to paint giant abstract paintings when you don't have like a studio. Yeah, I know. It was crazy. Like all of a sudden,
suddenly you have to pay bills and stuff, and it doesn't. You don't have as much free time.
Well.
I know.
It was kind of a little bit of a disappointing like turn of events when I realized that. Maybe I was just really naive. I don't know, but I didn't have a teaching degree, but I ended up teaching at a small Christian rural boarding school, like in the middle of South Dakota, as their art teacher. And I found the more I was doing like teaching art, I didn't have time to be creative myself. And that was just a really hard like transition for me. So then when I met my husband and we got married, I was still in the education like realm of working. And he was like, I really think you need to be using your creativity. Like it's such a gift. And it's just a shame that you're not doing something with it. So him and my best friend actually threw me they called it a Let's Force Terra to open an Etsy shop party. It was,
I want to meet your husband and this friend. Oh my goodness. Let's force Terra. I'm actually writing this down. Let's force Terra to start an Etsy shop company or store.
Party.
I love it.
Yeah.
And
it was
party,
great.
Right?
I was super cranky with him the whole day. So when he like came to like our bedroom, he was like, I'd been like in pajamas all day. And he was like, I'm going to lock you in here for a little bit. And he's like, and you should probably put pants on. And I was like, oh, okay. What's happening?
Like, honey, nobody's going to want to shop at your Etsy shop if this is how you're presenting yourself. Come on now, get it together.
Exactly. So he locked me in our room, and they like put up these weird little like black and white printed pictures of Richard Simmons memes saying you can do it. And they put like cheesecake on the table and wine. And then they're like, you're going to open an Etsy shop. And I was like, cool. I don't even know what's going in this Etsy shop. Like, I don't know what I'd even make to sell. So, but it just kind of got things started. So instead that night we focused on figuring out what to name my shop. And we kind of played around with some different names and I was doodling different logos. And eventually I remembered like Wild Goat is something that just has meant a lot to me because, so my name is Terra, Terra, which is Latin for earth. And I met someone once who was like, I think the Lord like wants to reveal something to you about the meaning of your name. And I was like, whoop-de-doo. I already know it means earth. Like, I don't really care. But he told me to look it up in this baby name book. And it said to also see the Hebrew version, which is Terah, which literally translates to like wild goat or wanderer. But the spiritual meaning was like excellent worth. And I just felt like the Lord really used that to be like, you see yourself as a weird, smelly wild goat, but I see you and the giftings I've given you as excellent worth. And so then when we were deciding on name.
I have to stop you for just a second, if I may.
Yeah, you sure can.
You have a kindred spirit to somebody else in my life who I adore and love, and she makes things as well. And just listening to you, your countenance sounds so much like hers. I'm smiling like from head to toe over here. I should say up here because I'm above you right now in North Dakota, right? But as I'm listening to you, Terra, there's a few things I would love, and I always hate to interrupt a person's story, but I'll bring you back to where you were, right? What I would love to know is, how did your parents specifically encourage you? And the follow-up question to that is, did this occur in a small town? Like, did you grow up in a very small town? And if so, what were the ways in which your parents encouraged your creativity? Because I will say, as a mom now, I have 3 kids, and I think our small towns have come a long way as far as what's offered in terms of like actual curriculum and stuff. But I just think, how do we nurture that? How do we foster that? So I would love to know what that looked like from your parents.
Well, my dad has always been very creative. Like if he puts his mind to it, he's very talented when it comes to like drawing and painting and pretty much anything. Cool. He's like the MacGyver of everything. But my mom always tells this story of how I was like in preschool or kindergarten, and I brought her this picture of a flower, and she was like, "Where did you get this?" And I was like, "I drew it, Mommy." And she was like, "Holy crap, this is a really impressive drawing for this kid to have made." Cool. And she was like, and so from then on, she's like, "I just always bought you art supplies and made sure you had stuff to be able to kind of play with that." And I guess I can remember from being even early elementary of just telling everyone like, I'm going to be an artist, like I'm creative. And so I think it's just like they recognized it and they just like kind of fed it. Like they brought me, like I said, they got me art supplies, and they always made sure that I had those opportunities. I don't know if I ever did a ton with like any clubs or programs. Like right. My hometown isn't like huge, but it's definitely like by my standards, it's not a small town, but like for most states in the US, it might be considered a small town.
How many people were in your hometown?
I think there's like 14,000 maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that's like a mid-sized community in North Dakota. Yeah. I mean, it is. That's not a tiny, tiny town, right?
Yeah, good old state capital. So,
okay, you were in Pierre. Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, yep. And that question, is really for me. It's just something when you think about what I feel like I hear you telling me is that they told you it was a gift.
Yeah,
like not necessarily being gifted. Even those are a nuance of the same thing. But I think it's like to honor it and acknowledge it as something that has value and merit and worth. I think is something really important, right? So it doesn't matter if you're in specific, like you said, you weren't in clubs and you have specific curriculum, but they looked at you and they said, this is something of value. And I think it's awesome from that early on. You were like, I'm creative and I'm going to be an artist. And I love that. I love that so much. I think that's awesome. Okay. Yeah. So back to Wild Goat. And that's also really beautiful. And I totally think your husband and your friend are rockin' cool people.
They are
for cool. Reminding you, because all they did was they called you back to yourself.
Yeah. And I'll admit, like my husband, I sometimes do tell him, I'm like, you're almost like disgustingly encouraging with some things. Where I'm like, okay, stop pushing me. I need a little bit of a breather here. But he's been my biggest cheerleader. So that's always really exciting. So yeah, we got started where I landed the name and I made my little logo and I was like, okay, what do I do next? And
great.
What I started with is like, I've always done like lettering. When I did more my abstract painting, I started incorporating like words and text on the edges of my canvases and then like mixing it in with the paintings themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think just the power of words has always meant a lot to me. And I just kind of started working with like watercolors and doing like the lettering, like quotes over the top of them. And I was like, I'm going to just make prints of these like watercolors I'm making.
Cool.
And I just kind of started with that, where like my first big goal was I was like, I'm going to have 10 pieces that I can make prints of. And then I'll launch my shop and I'll go from there. Like every time I started something new, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just went for it. And that's one of the, like my husband always says, is like, if you wait for something to feel like the perfect timing, it's never going to happen. Like you just have to kind of go for it.
Right.
And that's just really what we did. And I did the lettering and the paper products. And then we decided to, I always say we, because like my husband usually helps with a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But we went to like a small like flea market kind of craft fair in a small town, like a few miles from our small town that we live in. And, I had all this stuff of hauling tables and didn't know what I was doing and set things up and just kind of was like, let's see if anyone buys anything. And I'd also been doing like woodworking and painting on wood. And it just, I don't even know how exactly. It just, people liked what I made, I guess.
Okay, so here's a question for you. When was the first time that you had that feeling of like, okay, wow, I think this is actually going to work? So, because like that is honestly what you just described is what I think a lot of us go through. Anybody who has started anything from nothing. So I'm talking like, you basically either have your idea or your skill or your craft or whatever. And you're like, all right, I'm going to make something of this. I think what you just described is the experience. It's like trying it out and testing it out, finding a way to get it into the hands of people or in front of the eyes of the people whose hands they might, get into eventually. But was there a moment where you thought, okay, like I'm actually doing it?
I think there's been like little ones that all lead up to big ones kind of.
Yeah.
Like my first one where, I set up at this, it cost me like $20 to put up a table at this outside flea market. And, I made a couple $100 and I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible and amazing. And I'm like, people actually are buying stuff I made. This is magical. Yeah. And then, now I look back and I'm like, if I had a show where I made that much money now, I'd be like, well, this was a waste of time.
Well, of course.
Just because, your things change as you grow.
Absolutely.
But,
right.
And then I remember, like a few months later, like there was this big show that I was like, maybe in a few years I could do that show. But my husband was like, why not this year? And so I applied and I got in and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I was super stressed. But it happened pretty quickly. Like I launched my Etsy shop in like December of 2015, I think. Yeah, 2015. And like I'd kind of started doing business stuff in like that fall before there. But I launched that in December. And then I had my first little show thing in, I think it was May. And I was like, this is crazy. I don't really know what I'm doing. And like, I decided that summer I was going to not get cause I still work in the school system. So I had the summer off and I decided, I was like, I'm just going to see if this can pay replace my summer income.
Sure.
And I was able to. And like by that next, I don't even know. It was, I think the following December, then 1 year later, I quit my job to do my business full time. So I had been able to grow it that much to be able to replace an income in a year. And even then I was like, I don't really know if I ever felt like I've made it, like I'm doing it, but apparently I am. So
you are. And that was going to be my next question was, at what point did you stop teaching? Because I want to just also back up to something you said. I really loved what you said about, you would think as a creative person, as an artist, that teaching art would be such a great way to have a stable income and still have that creative outlet, but it actually hampered your own creativity, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you didn't say that explicitly. I shouldn't have put words in your mouth, but you just said I didn't have time. You said I didn't have time for my own outlet.
Yeah, and I honestly was so drained creatively afterwards that I really didn't have the desire to create my own work anymore. And that was hard for me because like my intention had never been to do education. I loved teaching there. It was a really fun experience. And then like I relocated when I met my husband. It made way more sense for me to relocate than for him to relocate.
Sure.
And when you've only worked so much in the education field, the only jobs you end up getting interviews for are in the education field. And I enjoyed it. But I was a teacher's aide and it was fun work. Like I loved the kids. It just wasn't what I felt like my calling truly was. So it was just one of those things. And we ended up, like, it's kind of a crazy story in itself, but I ended up quitting mostly, well, like my husband's long-term goal was always that I'd be able to sustain myself on my business. Like, I'll just be completely honest. It was his goal. And I was kind of like, I don't know if that'll actually work. Because I kind of had maybe a little bit more of a realistic view that not many creatives are able to make a living as creatives. But he was like, no, you can totally do this. But we ended up taking in a little guy who was just a few months old, a relative of mine, after some things happened. And he just kind of had a rough first few months. So we really felt we didn't want to put him into daycare right away or anything. So I actually quit to stay home with him full time and do my business full time. So we ended up having that as like a thing that just kind of pushed me to make that leap of faith. And it worked out. Like my business grew like 3 times from the year before. And it just has continued to grow since then. But it was just kind of, it was a really crazy life experience that led to me being able to take that jump. But I'm really glad that I did. I don't think I could go back to teaching in that aspect because it just didn't give me the same kind of fulfillment as my own business does.
Oh, I love this story so much. I really do. I think that I spend a lot of time talking to people about the fears of what other people think, and quitting a stable job, I think, always raises eyebrows. And again, not because people are judgy and mean, but because for a lot of people, they would never make that choice. And that's fine. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means it's wrong for them. But a lot of times their reactions can be really hard to take, especially if they're your family or your loved ones, right? So a couple things that make your story so special: having a husband that sees it and really encourages it. I mean, that is such a gift. I'm sure you know that, like, you get that.
Yeah.
But it's really, really cool that he was just like, no, of course you can. And I think what you're also speaking to, Terra, and I love it when people like you come on the show, because anybody listening to this, all they're going to hear is possibility. Because again, like, I think art is one of those things that not as many people feel connected to as I wish they would. Because I think we sometimes get caught up in this idea that creative people look and act and move through the world a certain way. And I think all of us have creativity. It just shows up differently for each of us, right?
Yes.
So I think that's something that's really cool about what you're talking about. But also, you know, if you really had this desire to make stuff and even draw or paint or whatever, trying to figure out, like, what does that look like that somebody would buy it feels really daunting and scary. And yet Etsy, what a beautiful place to start, because it's built for it. That's what that whole thing was made for, right? And it doesn't have to be as scary as it sounds. Like, starting an Etsy shop is a simple way, relatively, right?
Yes.
To dip your toe in and try it out. And you didn't, like, start it and then quit your job the next day. You built it up over an entire year.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think you also are, you know, even though you're creative, you're also very practical and pragmatic. And I think there's a lot that people can take away from that. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what about, where are you at now? Like, what does Wild Goat Design look like today?
Today, well, I am working towards buying a building. Like, I have a storefront.
Cool.
But we're buying a building that we're going to be able to convert into just more like of a storage, and move like our wood shop so that we're all in one location. Like, we're not split up where we're working, because my husband helps with a lot of woodworking side of things. And then I also do some of the woodworking. And yeah, we're kind of growing. I do murals now as well. I mostly in the area. I did, like, over the summer, I completed like my largest one yet. That was almost 100 feet long.
Where is it, Terra?
So that one, so it's 96 feet, I think, is at Patrick Henry Middle School in Sioux Falls.
Okay. The whole mural thing is so cool. I mean, and I say mural thing, like, I don't know, it feels like a very South Dakota thing. Like, South Dakota, for some reason, you guys are like the Fulton elevator and all these, I mean, they're beautiful and amazing and just crazy cool. And yet I think that if the idea of painting an entire mural kind of freaks people out, then, like, just look at one wall. In our small town, we have a couple of really cool little art installations. We have this coffee shop that's an ice cream shop and a bookstore. And along the side, they painted like a 6-scoop ice cream cone, like on the side of like a hole on the side of the building. So I think what you're talking about murals, what it's so cool is that well, first of all, it makes for cool photo opportunities, right? For people in small communities when they come to visit. But it's a way to make art accessible to people.
Yeah.
So that's really, really awesome. So you've kind of gotten into murals. Have you done any in your community?
Not in my community yet. Mostly because I said I've done a lot in schools so far.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And so, I've done quite a few like the Patrick Henry Middle School. And then over the Christmas break, I did some in Brandon, which is, on the other side of Sioux Falls as well. I've done some in a lot of surrounding towns. I've done them.
That's really
cool.
I
just haven't gotten to yet. I put a feeler out one time about doing one in Parker because I think that'd be so fun. We just haven't found a wall yet that seems quite like a good location yet. But there's always possibility for one to pop up soon. So,
well, having a storefront is a huge leap. And by that, I don't mean risky leap. I just mean that there are people that dream of having a storefront. And I think you've taken time. You've said it's 4.5 years and you've grown it until it makes sense for that to be the next step. And I just think that is such an inspirational story for so many people. And I love that you're going to have everything all in one place. And now I'm questioning and going to ask you, and maybe you do this. I think you mentioned that, do you do classes now? So are you coming back to teaching a little bit, but kind of grounded in your own craft versus it being like in a school.
Yes. So I have been teaching classes since my business started, really. I didn't really love the way that most of those like canvas designs looked. A lot of the ones I had seen for canvas painting classes. So I was like, well, I can paint. I'm just going to make my own designs. So I started making my own designs, and I always incorporated lettering into it because, again, I just love words. And it just kind of kept, people enjoyed the classes. They're really fun to break down. And they were something different than what they, were typically seeing at some of the larger shops. And one of the nice things is I would travel to people to teach them. So I love, like, anytime a small town asks me to come in, the classes always fill up because, we love when we don't have to travel into a larger city to enjoy those kind of things.
Yep. You're speaking my language, lady. So you are seriously so much. I think that's so cool. And I'm honestly, when we get off, I'm going to Google how far away you are from me. We'll have to give you a reason to travel to North Dakota.
Oh, I actually travel to North Dakota all the time.
Do you really? Okay.
I'm actually going to Fargo on Friday. So
I am way closer to you than Fargo. So there you go. We'll have to make that happen because I think that that's really cool. And again, what we're talking about kind of big picture is making art accessible. There is something so magical. That is such a cheesy word. I don't care. I'm using it anyway. Magical about helping people reconnect to that kind of self-expression. And yes. I just, and I just think anytime you can get people into something where it's not being judged and it doesn't have to look like everybody else's. And the value is in just knowing that you can. And I just don't think enough of us get to stretch or use that muscle in day-to-day life.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think one of my favorite classes to teach now is I still do the canvas painting classes, but the one that's taken off the most is I teach hand lettering. So in all of my work, I don't use stencil or vinyl for anything. It's all done with my hand, just winging it. And I firmly believe, I tell people when I teach this class, it's predominantly women usually who take my lettering classes,
right.
Is that as long as you're literate, you can do creative lettering. And there's sometimes with creativity, there is this impression that it's some sort of mythical, magical, quality that only a few people have and nobody can access it. But I'm no, you can do this. I firmly believe you might be one of the most least traditionally artistic people you've ever met, but you can still learn how to do this and make beautiful things and feel more confident in your own creative skills. And so I love teaching the lettering class because it's just fun to see people grow in their confidence of what they can create themselves.
Totally. Okay. So we're totally doing it. You're coming here because that's one of the things that I really, really, really want to see our community embrace more is just those forms of self-expression and creativity in a way that's playful and experiential and immersive and all those things that kind of stuff excites me so much. And the connection that takes place among the women that show up. And I am going to just say women in this case, even though I know you'd welcome dudes, with wide open arms, right?
I do.
But there's real connection that happens when people are co-creating something together and encouraging each other together, And I bet as you stand in front of that group, I bet you hear all the time, oh, I just don't know. Oh, I think I suck at this. I can just imagine the room and women saying out loud, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. And you having to also take on that role of encouraging them to say, yeah, you can. I'm sure it's a huge part of what you
all
do.
The time.
Yeah.
I even joke sometimes, I'm I'm not a, therapist or anything. And I was but teaching, at this point, I've probably taught somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 at least how to do creative lettering that I'm I feel I'm a little bit of an expert that we're women, we're way too hard on ourselves. We're way too critical. And I always joke that's I could, they'll be this looks like garbage. I'm so bad at this. And I'll look at it. And if I literally just trace over exactly what you wrote, I was you'll say it looks so much better just because you think I fixed it, even though I didn't change anything. And I'm you guys are so much better at this than you realize you are. So yeah, a lot of it is just encouraging and trying to help them get out of their own head.
Again, what a gift that you're giving to people, because what you're also then doing, I think, is incrementally giving a confidence that maybe they'll apply to something else. That the next time they come up against something where they're gosh, that looks really cool, but I don't think I'm whatever. I don't think I'm this. I don't think I'm that. Fill in the blank. We never think we're enough in some way, shape, or form. And you maybe are in their head saying, yes, you can do it. And you've proven to them that they can, right? So I just think that is such a gift, and especially to small communities, because like you said, I think as small towns, we have forgotten that we don't have to travel to get these experiences. We maybe don't have somebody that's skilled in hand lettering in our own communities, but we have you, right? Mm-hmm. There's people and experiences that we can draw from and bring them here, and then we won't have to always leave. Exactly. And I love that. So much fun. Okay, one more thing I want to ask you about. We had talked briefly that you work with your high school in a very specific way, and I would love for you to tell kind of what that looks like in Parker. And Parker's got 1,100 people. Is that right?
Yes.
That's your population? Yep. Okay. And I always just touch on that so people have a sense of how big your small town really is. But will you share what the student mentoring program that you're involved with looks like?
Yeah. So it kind of varies from year to year, but they have a really neat project here for seniors. It's like their senior research project kind of, that they learn something new or they plan to do like a big project. One of the specific things is they have to have like a community mentor, like someone, usually like a small business owner in the area that they mentor underneath. So like last year, I had a girl who wanted to learn how to do lettering to make some signs. And so she would come by like once a week. She would come over to my shop and we would talk about lettering. Like she came to my lettering class and then I'd kind of help her fine-tune her plans and how to do all these things. And she eventually made these signs that she presented then to her judges, and she got to present on that. And then this last year I had a girl who wanted to learn more about painting. And so she came over to the shop again just a few times. Like, it's just a really neat that we have such a diverse community and that there's these resources for these kids where they're like, I want to learn something about, a creative arts job. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, we have someone just, 2 blocks away on Main Street who can be your mentor for that to help you learn. So that's been really exciting. And I'm hoping that each year I'll probably get someone who comes over just because it's gone over pretty well. But it is, I know that one time one of my neighbors here on Main Street, she helped one of the seniors cater the banquet for the teaching staff because he wanted to learn about like food industry and catering and different stuff like that. So there's all these fun different projects that kids are doing, specifically working with small businesses in the town.
So how long has this program been going on? Do you know?
I don't know exactly how long. I know it's been happening for quite some time. I know that it was happening. I've only been in Parker for, I think almost 5 years.
Okay.
I want to say.
I guess, what I'm wondering is, have they seen kids actually come back? Like if they've gone away and gotten a degree in their respective field, have they seen a return?
I'm not 100% sure. I would have to probably ask some of the staff at the school if they have.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, like 4 years, 5 years isn't enough. That 10-year time frame tends to be where kids start really thinking about maybe returning. But I think, and the reason I wanted you to highlight this, Terra, is just, it's a cool way to help kids see, again, possibility for themselves. As long as you have internet, I will say that small towns really do need decent internet to function at the level, it's something that is a necessity. And I know that there's a lot of parts of rural America that don't have proper internet, and I really hope that legislation changes that at some point. But we're really fortunate in North Dakota. We've got great rural internet for the most part. I think you guys probably do as well. We're all flat. We're flat. So, that helps a lot. But what that does for us, though, is it just opens up an entire world of possibility. So like you can move back into a small town. You don't have to move back to where you're from, but you can move into a small town and you can create meaningful work for yourself. You can be connected to the world outside of your small town. And I think for a lot of this generation of kids, if they really want to create change in some way, you can do it quicker in a small town. Yes, yeah. I get that we don't always embrace new ideas. I get that can be maybe a little bit of a rub, but like you can get involved and you can contribute. And I think that's something that really is attractive to this new generation. What do you think of that? Because you're working with these students. When you're working with these students, are you thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about our future because none of these kids have work ethic and all of that stuff that so many people say?
I don't think that I feel that intense fear of work ethic.
Yeah,
as much, but I do think that it's really exciting to see kids getting involved and seeing that them being able to see that there are opportunities in the small town. Because I think that even growing up in a town that was, not as small as where I'm living now, there's just that, that restlessness that you have when you're like, I need to get out of here and go experience something bigger.
Yep.
But I think that it's, they grow and they mature and they realize that they can have bigger in that small town. And honestly, it's usually a lot easier, I think, to grow in a smaller community.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. It's kind of what my entire platform is built around is that belief. But I agree. And I think I definitely was a restless kid. Like I never in a million years thought I would come back to my hometown. I really didn't. And so when I did, I felt like I had a bit of an identity crisis. And I speak a lot about that. But now the work that I'm doing, everything, like if I had a checklist of things I wanted, not specifics either, but like things I wanted to feel, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Like what does fulfillment look like to me? What does contentment look like to me? I get to check all of those boxes now. That was all delivered to me through my very small town. And I never would have believed that was possible, you know?
Yeah.
So I just think it is, we live in a really different world and it's an amazing world. And there's so much at the fingertips of all of us. And I think you're such a great example too, of just not being afraid to try.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to leap and give up everything that you had. You didn't give up all the security until you knew you could.
Well, even then, I was still pretty terrified, I'll admit.
Oh, and you know what? I think that's totally normal. But I think what we don't often ask ourselves enough is like, okay, so what happens if I do fail? Well, that might be a little embarrassing. My ego might be a little beat up, but like you'll get a job and you'll make sure that your family doesn't starve. Like most of us are going to be responsible enough to do that then if it doesn't work out. And I just don't think we carry that out far enough and we just stop. We stop short of starting. And then you never know.
That's funny because so for the better part of last year, my husband was full-time helping me. And when we were talking about him possibly joining me full-time, I was talking to a friend and I was like, oh, it just stresses me out. I just don't know if, I can handle all this pressure. And she was like, so what if it doesn't work? And I was like, then it's terrible. We can't pay our bills and everything's terrible. And she's like, or he would just go back to working like a regular full-time job. She's like, and it was once she pointed out that very simple thing. Yep. I was like, oh, I guess it's not as terrifying as I thought it was. So
exactly. And I think too, the other thing, you and I discussed a little bit the idea of being multi-passionate. Mm-hmm. And I think in small towns, I think we actually do have a pretty cool opportunity to redefine what fulfillment and contentment with work really looks like, because maybe a person has 3 part-time jobs, all doing things that they really like and that fulfill them in different ways. And yet we tend to be like, well, aren't you going to get a real job? There's still that pressure to conform and do what feels normal, quote unquote, air quotes, to other people. And yet it doesn't matter. It's about you and it's about the conversations you're having with the person you live with. Because if you are married, I hate to say it, we don't get to just dismiss their feelings, right?
Yeah.
When we get married, they're kind of an important person to consult with. But if it ever came to a point where you felt like everything was getting really tight, either one of you could potentially just pick up something part-time and bridge that gap. I mean, that's a possibility that exists. And sometimes we just need to, like you said, sometimes it's so simple and you just have to think about it, think it all the way through. And then you'll realize it's not so bad. We'll work this out one way or the other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been such a fun conversation, Terra. I'm so thrilled to know you. And I'm going to I was on your Facebook page a little bit. And then for sure, we're going to link to everything that you want our listeners to know. But for sure, you're going to get up here. We're going to get you up here to Oaks and have you do a session. That'd be so much fun. But the very last question that I try to ask every guest, if I remember, is what does living big in a small town look like to you?
Oh, yes. And I was talking to my husband last night about this where I'm trying to think of exactly what it and I think he was talking about just the encouragement that comes from a community is one of the big things he would point out. Yeah, and I think I would probably say this, something similar of just the encouragement. I don't know, just the community comes together for you so much that it's so exciting. One of the first instances I saw is, we had brought that little guy home with, less than 24 hours notice. We suddenly have a newborn in our home.
Wow.
And someone posted on Facebook in a community group about, there's this family that has this need. And within 24 hours, we had crib and a bassinet and clothes up the wazoo. We suddenly had absolutely everything we could possibly need for this new baby that came into our life. And they didn't ask questions. They didn't necessarily know us because we weren't originally from here, but just still that outpouring of support and encouragement. And I mean, the same thing then with my business. They've just been so encouraging. And a few months ago, when we decided to start looking for a new shop location from where I originally was, I went to found this space, but I hadn't like talked to one person, and she was like, oh, well, what about that space? Like, oh, and here, I know his wife. Here's like the contact info. You can reach out to them. I think it's just that's what makes it feel so great, is just the community and the encouragement and the support that you get in these small towns.
Well,
that
and I think
you just don't get it in the larger, I just don't think you get that same thing in the larger areas.
I think that's such an important thing to highlight. I really do think that we want each other to succeed. We want to see small businesses succeed in our small town. And I think what you've identified too is another tip for people listening, is that to make sure you're asking. Because like people do want to help, but sometimes they don't know what you need help with. And so if you make it clear what it is you're looking for, people will step up. They will help you. They will connect you to other people, But sometimes we need to be less afraid to say, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I'm looking for, and make yourself open to people's help and suggestions. Asking for help's not easy. I get it. But it's amazing what happens, especially like you said, in a small town. People just rally around each other.
They do. And I love that. Like, even though, like I said, I'm not originally from here, I do feel like, the community has been really welcoming, and we feel like, we're from here now. So it's a happy place to be for us.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, thank you, Terra, so much. And we're going to make sure that everyone goes out and checks out all the cool things that you have to offer, and just keep living big in your small town. It is such a cool story, and I'm grateful that you took the time to be on with me today.
Thank you. I'm glad that you asked me to be on the show. So.
Well, again, when I get good recommendations from guests that I love, I can't help but reach out and say, hey, you've been recommended to me. So, and she was absolutely spot on. So thanks so much.
She's wonderful too. I love her bags too. So we'll just throw that out there.
Yeah. So we're talking about Rebecca Scott. We might as well just say it. We're talking about Rebecca Scott.
She's
amazing.
Wonderful. She's a good friend.
She is. Beautiful soul. All right. Well, thank you so much. And don't be a stranger.
All right. Thanks. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Small Town Big Talk Show. If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to subscribe on Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. The more reviews we get, the easier it will be for other small town friends to find us. We encourage you to keep on living big in your small town, because the size of your life is not determined by your zip code.